that we can get out of here this evening, I am going to go ahead and start with our task force. So our agenda this evening is one, to discuss communication policy. I will review the priorities that we have developed over the last year, share our recommendations, and then talk about the current task force and what will be happening with that, talk about future task force. We will then open it up for public comment, and then we'll explain what the charge will be for WAD and WISRID. Okay, so regarding communication policy, it is my preference to sign, but we have a lot of things going on with technology in this room. We have participants joining us via Zoom, and we also have cameras going, and we have some other things happening. So just for the ease of logistics, I'll be speaking at this meeting, and we have a lovely team of interpreters today. And later on in the meeting, I will open it up for public comment. Certainly would like your feedback. Right now, I'm going to pass out some index cards for you to start writing your questions or thoughts or concerns. And if you could put your name on the back of the card, that would be appreciated. I'm going to ask that we will, at the end, when we open it up, give those cards to the interpreters so that we have the correct spelling of your name. And it also helps for the minutes as well. There's another thing I wanted to say. If you are going to make a comment, whether it's in sign or English, I'm going to ask that you come to the front of the room and just let us know that you're signing or speaking so that we can quickly adjust what it is that we need to do. During the meeting, I ask that you allow me to get through the information first. A lot of the questions that you might have might be answered by the time I get through the presentation, maybe not all of them, but some of it might be. So I just ask that you be patient with that and allow me to get through it. A lot of the stuff that I'm presenting today has been covered in the minutes that have been posted on WISRID, WAD, WESP. There's not a ton of new information. There is some, so I'll share with you those updates, and then we'll take it from there. Good? They're good? Okay. As you know, most of you may know, maybe you don't know, but the last year we did a lot of collecting of feedback from stakeholders throughout the state. At the April meeting, we had shared the priorities with you, and the 4 priorities that came to the top were obviously certification, what might be some alternatives to that, and in that we talked about exemptions as well. So we created a subcommittee to address that, and they did some work this summer. Tying with certification, we created another subcommittee on deaf interpreters. The current law, it is the feeling from many members of the deaf community that doesn't reflect well the realities that deaf interpreters must deal with, and so a desire was there and a lot of energy behind that and making sure that a new law reflects the realities so that they can get those job opportunities and are able to obtain licensure in a reasonable way. So that was that. The third one was the DSPS and DPI Memorandum of Understanding, and making sure there's clarity about individuals that possess a DPI license and individuals who possess a DSPS license and who can work where. So that was another priority. And then the fourth one was enforcement. Concerns about what's happening with interpreters that may be in violation of the current law. So those were the 4 priorities that we worked on this past summer. Okay. Based on those priorities and with the work of the subcommittees this summer, we have come up with some recommendations. Again, a lot of these recommendations have been posted. I did not print everything. I would have wasted a lot of paper doing that, so if you have not had an opportunity to read that, I strongly suggest that you go to one of those many websites and get caught up on those attachments to make sure that you have a good understanding. It's hard just to jump into a meeting without having some of that context and that background to understand what has led us to the decisions that we've, or the recommendations that we've made today. We've made no decisions, these are just recommendations. I just found this online. I don't know who this person is. Anyway. So the first thing I want to talk about is the work of the subcommittee on certification. And we got a lot of work done this summer, and I feel like the things that we came up with are a really great start. What we did is that we looked at other states. We looked at Illinois, we looked at Michigan, and we looked at Texas to, instead of reinventing the wheel, let's look what's out there and let's see what's available. And from that, we were able to select what we felt would be beneficial for the state of Wisconsin. And so that helped us in drafting this current document about the Wisconsin interpreter licensure levels. And I will say one of the reasons why we decided to go with a leveling system, it is our expert opinion, I guess I would say, is that with the restricted license and the renewable license, when that was enacted, the reality of our state and the reality of our country was actually much different regarding what was happening with interpreters. At that time, it seemed reasonable that an interpreter would be able to achieve national certification within a 6-year window. We weren't having the problems that we're facing today with a 20% pass rate with NIC. That was not the expectation. That was not the reality at that time. Our reality has changed. And some of the concerns that many people have brought up is the shortage of interpreters, that there's this big concern that there will be a gap if we continue with this restricted and renewable license without any options. And so, an announcement. So with the leveling, looking at other states, this could be one way to help reduce the concerns about a shortage. Because what we are proposing is we have these 3 different levels. We have our intermediate, advanced, and masters. And someone could ideally pass their BEI test on English proficiency and their basic exam, which is a performance, and they may cap out at that. They might never ever pass their BEI advanced or master. I'm just throwing out a possible scenario. The way that the license is currently structured, a person like that, after 6 years, would never be able to work. They would lose their ability to work in the community. And not every interpreter in this world is going to be an advanced or master interpreter. I think that's something I think we just have to be honest and transparent about. But I do think that we do have some settings that are appropriate for interpreters possessing an intermediate level license that can work and should not have to fear after 6 years that they're going to lose their job, have an inability to work, and go through the anxiety that we have seen many of our interpreters go through. And so all of these levels, once again, me and chairs, we do not get along. Students, you all know, yes you do. It doesn't matter where I am, I just run into chairs. Okay, but the reality is that these are all indefinite as long as you maintain CEUs, professional development, that kind of stuff, and that you're always renewing your license as is, right? So there's no time clock kind of thing. The other piece to that, which has been somewhat solved, which is another thing that I worked on this summer, is that DSPS did approve the BEI as an option for our state license. So that means for the restricted license, the basic is equivalent to a WITA 2.2. Okay? The WITA has not been taken away yet. It has not been sunset yet, to my knowledge, at this point. So it's one or the other. You don't have to pass both. And then for the renewable license, the BEI Advanced, or a Master, or a NIC, or SEL, which is no longer available, but all of those will allow you to get your renewable license. You just have to get one of those. Okay? So going back to this leveling system, we, again, like we said, we got the explanations of the category from Texas. Texas had a nice holistic explanation of this is what an intermediate interpreter can do. So they provided that description. So we used that, and then I can't tell you off the top of my head, both Illinois and Michigan listed what was allowed, and again, this is not an all-inclusive list. I know when people look at this list, ideas are already percolating, I get it. Again, so these are certainly things that can be discussed. What we liked though from one state was what was not allowed, right? And having that nice clear distinction that if you're at this level, you cannot work in these settings, period. Okay? The other thing that the subcommittee came up with that I think would help as we talk about enforcement is it is our hope with this new proposed legislation is that what we are proposing is that we would be required to wear ID as interpreters. And that coloring system would list those badges would have the coloring system and our credentials. And that it is our hope that through that visual means, one, educating the deaf community about what a yellow intermediate interpreter can and cannot do, what a advanced green interpreter can and cannot do, what a master, you guys get it, all right. I don't want to be too redundant, but you get the point. And I think using that visual ID and badge and requiring that, one, forces everybody to be ready to show their credentials at any time. And again, reinforces from a deaf consumer side of things, am I getting the right interpreter for this particular assignment that I need, right? So I think it has some merit. I think it definitely can be a good thing. I'm hoping to see that enacted. So that was another thing that we came up with deals with the shortage and with enforcement. Those are not able to solve everything, but that is hopefully going to solve that to some degree. Okay. I'm 100% certain there are questions about this document. People will have comments, I know that. So again, it's available on the website if you want to look at it a little bit more closely, so you can ask your questions at the end, but I will come back to this. Okay. All right, so now I want to talk about the the Deaf Interpreter Subcommittee. And again, our subcommittees met this summer. We had a framework, and we realized the work that we were doing, it was not appropriate, and we did not have the expertise to determine what the leveling should look like for deaf interpreters. Absolutely not. But we certainly wanted to be allies and partners and offer a framework, have some discussion and brainstorm that, and we did that. And I think based off that discussion, that subcommittee has come up with something that they think is doable and reasonable and appropriate for our state, for the deaf interpreters that work here. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to ask Ashley to come up and just talk a little bit about their rationale. It's still a work in progress. Again, none of these documents are finalized. We are continuing to open it up to feedback.
All right, good evening everybody. My name is Ashley. I was on the subcommittee for deaf interpreters and certified deaf interpreters. As Pam commented, we've been meeting pretty regularly, and at our recent meeting we wanted to compare licensure for the hearing interpreters and see how we can maybe sync the deaf interpreter license to be more critically looking at what is required of a deaf interpreter. So we felt like we divided it into two different licensures. And because of the experience of deaf interpreters, we don't want novice interpreters who are deaf going into some very high-risk situations like mental health or legal. And so we felt there needs to be a pathway to being a professional as a deaf interpreter. So that's what we've decided, that these leveling systems is a comfortable milestones that people can hit to getting licensure. So we felt like the green level system is similar to what Pam just outlined for hearing interpreters, so kind of like their intermediate level. And then we also have a master's level, which is the silver. So the green is more that intermediate level, people who are getting acclimated to the field, and then so if you think about that, and as far as the hearing interpreters go, again, they're intermediate, so we have one for the deaf interpreters. And these are more, general, low-risk situations, but the silver level would be more high-risk, mental health, think about it like psychological evaluations or probation and parole, those types of situations. Now, if a deaf interpreter wanted to go from a green to a silver level, they must be certified by RID, such as the CDI exam, or currently BEI does not have a CDI certification, but as Pam just stated, it's in process. So they're in process of creating an exam, so we included that. So that pilot exam, we're hoping we'll be able to add as part of the master level. And then the silver interpreting would include 150 hours. I'm sorry, the green level would require 150 hours of interpreting experience, say for the, in settings such as medical. And these have to be documented. And so when you verify that those hours have been done, you create a portfolio, and then you can submit later to get the silver level. And again, that's more high-risk situations. And we separated the different types of medical interpreting that you would do, checkups for the green level, but maybe mental health medical interpreting for the silver. So again, there is a differentiation in the type of interpreting that CDIs would work in. So you can see a DI, which means deaf interpreter, with a star is a not yet certified individual, but they would be submitting with a portfolio to achieve that silver level status.
Hello? Is it working? Is it all, am I all shut down? Oh, I'm back on. Just to clarify something that Ashley had stated, is that when looking at what we had developed with the 3 levels, because deaf interpreters tend to have native competency, that idea that they would need that intermediate step wasn't critical. And when we're talking about the numbers of deaf interpreters, it is much smaller. And so what it really boils down to is that the green deals with what type of experiences do they have, what sort of language competency in both languages do they have. They need that time, that training, which is why they would be at the green level. And after some endorsements and after some training, then they could apply for the silver level, which moves them into more of those high-stakes settings. The other thing, too, is just a point of clarification regarding testing. That was such a David Summers moment when my dad's preaching and the interpreters are flagging him down and he is in his zone and he doesn't see the interpreters at all. That's lovely. Okay, I just had it. There I am, my father's daughter. All right. The other thing, too, is that, again, I keep talking about we have our ideal, what we hope would be the expectation, but we also have to look at our reality, right? About where interpreters can work, what qualifications they must have, and especially with deaf interpreters, there's no test available right now for them. And so in our license, to require that doesn't seem reasonable at this point. And we have no idea when these tests are going to become available. Based on what RID has shared with the community, there is not a really clear sense of that. And we know that BEI also is in its pilot phase with their deaf interpreting test, but again, we don't know when that's going to happen. And also the availability and the access to that exam is going to take some time. And so what we came up with is that idea of the portfolio where a deaf interpreter can document and can verify and get those endorsements to say, you know what, I meet these qualifications, and then we're not forcing them to take a test that doesn't even exist right now at this point, right? It seems logical, but I just wanted to clarify that for you. And even if the BEI comes out next year, my point is, availability, access, it takes time for that to become mainstream, right? That takes time. And so what can we do in the meantime? And the other thing too with both the levelings that we have for hearing interpreters and deaf interpreters is that it's very common that realities change. And so a license should be looked at every year on an annual basis, every 2 years possibly, to make sure that it's current and reflects what's happening, right? And so even though this might be proposed, eventually more amendments might happen, we might have to propose new legislation, that's common, based on my conversations with DSPS and what they advised to both Representative Brostoff and I this summer. So I just wanted to clarify all of that.
So I just wanted to clarify also with the endorsement portfolio. So you have to do workshop training of 40 hours. You would have to do diversified types of training, legal training or deaf-blind training, all different types of training. But as long as it's documented with that total 40 hours of experience, as long as you're taking even classes too, like we want people to have that documented hours of workshops or classes such as linguistics of ASL or deaf culture, classifiers, because it's important that native signers also understand the rules governing their language. That way you can be a better interpreter when working in that language. So that would be part of this endorsement portfolio. And as well as that 150 hours that I mentioned that was documented as experience. Now, we haven't set in stone these numbers. It's just our idea, our assumptions of what a deaf interpreter would experience in a reasonable amount of time, so that that interpreter could get observation experience, document that, as well as actual experience doing the job. So, and again, we want it to be a healthy milestone journey for interpreters to become licensed in the state of Wisconsin. We don't want people to be lost in the cracks of this system. We want them to have a clear vision of that journey to be able to become working interpreters. And so we want to make sure it's a healthy pace for them to work through and navigate. And that it also mirrors their hearing peer colleagues. We already borrowed language from the requirements of the DSPS licensure, but then this is our modifications that we made and some of the edits that you can see here for the green license. We also want people to have professional ethical training. It doesn't necessarily have to be through RID, because there are other entities that could provide that type of training. And again, 40 hours of training, we have different options that people could go through, such as like Betty Economics' Foundations, mental health training down in Alabama, the legal training. You can scroll up a little. And then the deaf individual could choose from this list. You can also go through specialized training, especially if you wanted to work in the legal system, so you want to do observation, rules of evidence training, Wisconsin court orientation, making sure that they get a full spectrum of that specialization before they move forward with the license. We want them to observe deaf hearing teamwork. And we haven't really determined if there's a specific amount of hours, but again, this is a rough draft, this is not decided, but this is just a part of all those hours that you need to be required for the law. And we even included the Deaf Interpreter Conference, which held its first annual conference last year in 2015, so we wanted to add that as part of this because we felt there's going to be another conference coming up in Pennsylvania, and there should be more for people to go and learn. was recommended prior to our license law being enacted that people would have specific coursework that they would need to become a deaf interpreter. So we have added that now, and again, this is sort of pending, but we've given the options of, say, introduction to the profession of interpreting, English ASL interpreting, ASL 5 and 6 courses, linguistics of ASL 1 and 2, we recommend classifiers, all these different types of coursework. But we're trying to be careful because we don't want to shy off interpreters from becoming a part of the profession because of the required amount of coursework. I know there's not many deaf interpreters out there as it is, so we're trying to discuss what is a reasonable amount that we can require of people and still make it happen for them to get involved in the profession. I believe it was through, I can't remember which state exactly, but to get the license, you have to prove that you've taken the CBI written exam or the BEI written exam. And should we require that as part of our Wisconsin licensure? So there's been some back and forth with this, as whether or not we can focus on the written part of the exam since we're moving towards the BEI, but that we put in there as a consideration. This would be a renewable license. This renewable license would happen every other year. And we ask that people keep abreast of the profession by taking additional coursework or workshops so that they keep up with their licensure and certification. So that will be a part of the requirements to renew. So we have, again, the green and silver license. And once somebody achieves 150 hours working, they can also specialize in a type of setting such as medical or mental health. Or they can specialize in legal by observing first and then maintaining the master's license to work. So these are just some options for specialization as well for deaf interpreters. Again, this is still in discussion, these are under consideration, but this was just a draft that we created only a couple weeks ago because we wanted to start getting it, the ideas out there and gathering feedback on what you think this proposal looks like.
Okay. And just another point of clarification is the thing that we discussed was for the deaf interpreting levels and license, looking at that four-year degree requirement. What was supposed to happen this year with RID is that for the CDI exam, deaf interpreters would have to have their four-year degree to be able to stand for